Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Alexis Rowe. I was 36 years old when my marriage ended, not with a scream, but with a sentence I was never meant to hear. That morning I stood in front of my vanity longer than usual, studying the woman in the mirror as if she were a stranger I was trying to understand. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. I chose a deep plum silk dress, not to impress my husband, but to remind myself of the woman I had been before I became exhausted from carrying everyone on my back. 10 years of building a life can quietly drain the color out of you if you are not careful. I smoothed the dress over my hips, fastened small gold earrings, and slipped on heels I had not worn in months. For a moment I tried to imagine the evening ahead as I had planned it. A quiet celebration, a return to the beginning, a reminder that what we started still mattered. The thought felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. I had planned a surprise, not a luxury restaurant or a crowded party, but the old campus pub in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago, the place where my husband and I had held our wedding reception when we were young, broke, and certain that love alone would be enough. Back then we had danced between mismatched tables, laughing while our friends passed around cheap champagne in plastic cups. I wanted to step back into that memory and see if there was anything left of us there. I slipped a small gift box into my bag, a watch my husband had once mentioned, half joking, saying his old one looked worn when he stood in front of his students. I remembered the exact way he had glanced at his wrist, the faint wrinkle between his brows. Remembering was my habit. I remembered every sentence, every mood, every need. He spoke. I stored it away and tried to answer it later, often quietly, often alone. As I drove through the city at dusk, the skyline glowed against a sky fading from blue to charcoal. Memories surfaced uninvited. Cheap meals eaten in dim apartments, promises whispered across pillows, the night he had squeezed my hand and said, "Struggle with me now, Alexis, and one day I will give you the world." At the time, those words felt like a vow. Later, I would understand that they were a hope he placed in my hands, and then gladly forgot. When I turned onto the side street behind the pub, I saw it immediately, my husband's black Mercedes tucked into the narrow lot. For a brief second my heart softened. Maybe he remembered our anniversary too. Maybe he had beaten me there to surprise me for once. Maybe, despite the distance that had been growing between us, we were still standing on the same side. I parked a few spaces down and stepped out into the evening air. The back entrance to the pub, the same kitchen door we had used years ago when the front felt too fancy for our student clothes, was slightly open. Warm light spilled onto the pavement, carrying with it the faint smells of fryer oil, grilled onions, and spilled beer. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked toward it with the gift still tucked in my hand. I was a few steps away when I heard his voice. "She is pure, Alexis. She does not care about money. She understands me. We can make new memories here. Let the old ones fade." I froze. The gift box grew heavy in my palm. The world narrowed to the sound of his voice and the way he said my name, not as a partner, but as a reference point to be pushed aside. Have you ever realized in a single moment that the life you have been protecting no longer exists? I stood there in the narrow alley, my back against the cool brick, and felt something inside me go silent. I did not cry. I did not storm in. I simply understood that whatever this night had been meant to be ended with those words. This was not an incident. This was a conclusion. Before I became the woman standing outside that kitchen door, I had been someone else entirely. I grew up in a stable home in a middle-class neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, not extravagant but secure. My parents believed in steady work and clear numbers. They taught me responsibility early, and by my late 20s, I had already built a small but growing logistics company that specialized in regional shipping and last-mile delivery. My parents did not raise me to be timid. My father used to slide financial statements across the table and say, "If you understand where the money goes, you will never be helpless." My mother would remind me that kindness without boundaries turns into exhaustion. I heard them. I just did not yet understand that their advice would one day apply to marriage as much as to business. I met my husband, Calvin, at a university lecture near campus. He was a young professor with a sharp mind, a worn briefcase, and a smile that softened when he talked about art and social history. He stayed after the lecture to answer questions, and I stayed too, pretending I wanted to debate theory when I really wanted to keep hearing his voice. He was brilliant, thoughtful, and struggling. full of ideas but short on money and time. My parents were cautious, not because Calvin lacked money, but because his family depended on him in ways that left very little room for anyone else. His mother had health problems. His younger sister seemed permanently on the edge of a crisis. He carried all of them in his head. Love can carry a lot, my mother said, but it should not carry everyone's refusal to grow up. I believed love could balance the weight. I believed patience was strength. We married in a small church and held our reception at the campus pub because it was all we could afford. There were folding chairs and a playlist made on an old laptop. Calvin danced with me under dim lights while our friends clapped along. When we slipped out back for a moment alone, he took my hands and said, "I do not have much now, but I promise you, Alexis, one day things will be different. One day I will give you more than this." I told him I did not care about more. I cared about us. Reality crept in quietly after the wedding. His mother's health declined faster than anyone expected. His sister moved apartments twice in a year and always seemed one bill away from collapse. Research grants were slow to appear. One problem became 5, then 10, and each time I stepped in without being asked. That is how it starts, not with a demand, but with a quiet assumption that you will fix what others drop. I handled hospital bills from my phone while sitting in waiting rooms. I paid tuition extensions and credit card balances late at night after finishing payroll for my employees. When Calvin's research stalled because a small grant fell through, my company filled the gap. We told ourselves it was temporary. When his mother needed better care, I arranged it and signed as guarantor. When his sister wanted to start fresh, I co-signed the lease and paid the deposit. At first, Calvin looked at me with awe. "You are amazing," he would say, kissing my forehead while I sat with spreadsheets open on my laptop. Later, he stopped noticing. At home, I worked after midnight. At work, I carried everyone on my back. Calvin would sit on the couch, rubbing his temples, saying he felt pressure and that success scared him. I confused supporting him with protecting him from reality. I thought love meant absorbing weight, so someone else could stand taller. I did not see that my shoulders were disappearing beneath the load. I told myself that once his career stabilized, once his family was settled, once the next crisis passed, we would finally breathe and he would step up beside me. The problem with once is that it never arrives when people are accustomed to you fixing everything. My parents insisted on a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. I signed it without hesitation, barely reading the clauses. My assets, including my company and certain properties I already owned, stayed separate. It felt unnecessary, almost insulting to think I would one day need protection from the man I loved. I tucked the document into a folder and then into the back of a drawer, sure it would gather dust forever. Looking back, I know I was not a wife in Calvin's eyes. I was infrastructure. Infrastructure is invisible until it collapses. I scheduled his medical appointments and his conferences. I filled out grant paperwork and caught errors in his budgets. I reminded him of deadlines. When his sister, Tori, called crying because her car had broken down again, I called our mechanic and paid the bill. When his mother, Gloria, needed a new prescription that was not covered, I found a way. The more invisible I became, the more Calvin complained about feeling suffocated. He said our life was too structured, that every bill, every calendar reminder, every plan made him feel trapped. He said he wanted more spontaneity, more lightness, more space to breathe. I tried to offer all of that without removing the structure that kept everyone fed and housed, but you cannot be both the scaffolding and the breeze. Standing behind that kitchen door, listening to Calvin speak about purity and souls, I finally understood something I had ignored for years. He did not feel supported. He felt entitled. He did not see my sacrifices as love. He saw them as a backdrop, expected and unremarkable, while he chased feelings that made him feel inspired. I stayed where I was, pressed against the cold brick wall, letting the sounds inside guide me. A young woman's voice floated out, soft and hesitant, like someone afraid to take up too much space. She spoke about tuition deadlines, about a mother back home who was sick, about not knowing whether she could afford to finish the semester. I recognized that tone. I had heard it in my own voice years earlier when I believed that needing help was a shame to hide. Calvin answered her the way he used to answer me. His voice was calm, reassuring, filled with certainty he rarely showed at home anymore. "Do not worry," he said. "I will take care of it. You just focus on your studying. You are too gifted to be distracted by money." The familiar pattern twisted in my chest. I had always loved that part of him, the desire to rescue, the confidence in his words. I just had not understood that he preferred the feeling of rescue to the reality of partnership. The young woman hesitated. I could hear it in the pause. "But where will the money come from?" she asked quietly. "Your wife manages everything. Does she know you help me?" At the mention of me, the warmth drained from Calvin's tone. His answer came sharp and fast. "Do not bring her up," he said. "She only understands numbers. All she talks about is work and money. Being with her feels like living in a closed room. With you, I can breathe." The words did not kill me. They clarified me. In that moment, I felt something more painful than anger. I felt foolish. Foolish for having been so thorough in every part of my life except my own marriage. I braced my hand against the brick and leaned closer, needing to see, needing to confirm what my mind already knew. Through the narrow gap in the door, I saw her face clearly. Serena Price. I had signed her scholarship approval myself months earlier. Her application had described hardship, discipline, and ambition. She had come to my office with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white, thanking me with tears in her eyes, calling me her inspiration. I had shaken her hand and told her to focus on school, that the money would be handled. Now Serena sat perched on my husband's knee at a corner table in the same pub where we had once celebrated our wedding, her hand resting on his shoulder, her head tilted toward him, as if he were her entire world. The same account that had paid for her scholarship had just funded their drinks and whatever promises hung between them. In business, you learn patterns. Fraud leaves trails. So does betrayal. Suddenly, small details rearranged themselves in my mind. Unfamiliar charges on joint cards, weekend expenses that never seemed to match the receipts, hotel transactions justified as conferences, and small withdrawals that did not fit any budget line. Calvin had not become careless. He had become confident that I would not look too closely because I trusted him. I did not feel rage yet. I felt a cold, clean line drawing itself through my life, separating before from after. Behind that door, Calvin spoke about souls and art and freedom. Serena listened, believing every word. I did not interrupt them. Instead, I reached into my bag, took out my phone, and opened the recording app. If this was the truth, I wanted it complete. I wanted it documented. I took one long breath, straightened my dress, and pushed the door open. The hinge creaked, and the sound cut through the room like a blade. Both of them flinched. Serena slipped off his lap, cheeks flushing. Calvin stood so quickly that his chair scraped back and nearly tipped. Fear looks different when it belongs to someone who has been lying. It is less about loss and more about exposure. I walked to their table with measured steps and pulled out an empty chair. I sat down calmly, crossing my legs the way I did in board meetings when numbers did not lie and excuses were useless. "Do not stop," I said, laying my phone on the table. "You were just explaining how pure she is." My voice was steady. I surprised myself with that. Calvin opened his mouth, but no sound came. His eyes darted from my dress to my face to the small gift box peeking out of my bag, as if the sight of the watch he had once wanted might suddenly rewrite what he had said. His skin had gone pale beneath his warm complexion. Serena shrank into herself, eyes wide, hands twisting in her lap like she hoped smallness might erase what I had witnessed. I turned to Serena. "You remember me," I said. "We sat in my office when you received your scholarship. You told me your story. You thanked me for the funding." She nodded, eyes filling with tears. "I did not know," she whispered. "I did not mean to." I held up a hand. "Not yet. I am not here to listen to apologies you may not even owe me. I am here to make sure we are all clear." I turned back to my husband. "A moment ago," I said, "you told her I only understand money, that I suffocate you, that being with me feels like living in a closed room, that everything about me is outdated." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a flicker of anger. "You had no right to listen in," he said. "This is my private life. You control everything, Alexis. Living with you feels like a cage." I smiled then, not because anything was funny, but because his words were so familiar. I had heard variations of them whispered through gritted teeth whenever I pushed him to follow through on something he had promised. When people benefit from structure, I said quietly, they call it support. When they want to escape accountability, they call it control. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. "Let us be clear, Calvin. The house you live in sits in Lincoln Park. I bought it before we married. The mortgage is in my name. The utilities, the insurance, the taxes, my signatures, my payments. The car you drive? Purchased through my company fleet. Your research funding? That came from contracts I signed. Your mother's medications? My accounts. Your sister's rent when she falls behind? My transfers. Serena swallowed hard, glancing between us. I thought, she began, then trailed off. I looked at her again, softer this time. I know what you thought, I said. You thought you were hearing a man stretched thin by a cold, distant wife who cared more about money than love. That is the story he told you. It is the same story he told himself to feel righteous while he spent someone else's labor. Calvin slammed his palm lightly against the table. You are twisting everything, he said. You never listen to how I feel. You talk about numbers and budgets and obligations until there is no air left. With Serena, I can be myself. She sees me, not just what I bring in. She does not make life one long spreadsheet. His voice cracked on the last word, a mix of anger and desperation. With Serena, I said evenly, you can pretend the bills pay themselves. I straightened. Tomorrow, I will file for divorce. His head snapped up. Tonight, I continued, you will experience life without my structure. No money, no safety net, no silence from me. The difference between control and boundaries is that boundaries do not move just because someone is unhappy. Serena's eyes filled again. Please, she said, voice shaking. We love each other. Let him go. You do not need him. You have your career, your company. You are strong. Why hold on if you are so unhappy? It was an honest question from a young woman who still believed love alone could sustain two people standing on uneven ground. You are right, I said. I do not need him. I picked up my bag. But I will not subsidize betrayal and call it love. I rose to leave, and that was when I noticed movement behind them. Two familiar figures stepped through the front entrance of the pub, dressed a little too carefully for such a casual place, smiling as if they were walking into a celebration rather than a reckoning. Gloria, my mother-in-law, entered first, her hair perfectly styled, a soft floral perfume preceding her. She carried herself with the practiced calm of a woman who had spent her life believing she should never be questioned. Torai followed, phone already in hand, her expression pinched with annoyance, as if this night were yet another inconvenience in a life that should have been easier. Their eyes moved from Calvin to Serena, then to me standing by the table. Torai rolled her eyes. So this is the surprise dinner, she said flatly. You could have chosen a better place for drama, Alexis. Her tone made it clear she saw herself as a spectator, not a participant in the damage. Gloria sighed, pressing her hand to her chest as if my presence offended her sensibilities. Alexis, you should not behave like this in public, she said. A man has needs. If he strays, it is often because his home is cold. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed, the kind of voice that had probably excused many sins over the years. I studied her face, looking for hesitation, for even a flicker of doubt. There was none. Torai crossed her arms. Calvin has a reputation at the university, she snapped. You cannot humiliate him like this. Whatever problem you two have, you discuss it privately. Not here, not like this. Privately, I repeated. Like the way you all discussed this privately without me? They glanced at one another. For the first time, I saw the outline of their plan. This had not been a mistake or a sudden temptation. It was a family decision supported by a mother who liked the lifestyle my money provided and a sister who loved convenience more than accountability. Gloria frowned. Do not twist things, she said. Serena is young. It is normal for a man to feel inspired by youth and possibility. You have become too focused on money and control. You stopped being a wife and turned into a manager. A man wants warmth, not just stability. You pushed him away with all this organization. The words landed with precision. They had rehearsed this narrative together until they believed it. I let a moment of silence stretch between us. Then I asked one simple question. Do you know how much your son earns as a professor each month? The table went quiet. Gloria's lips parted, but no number came out. About $4,000 before taxes, I continued. That does not pay for your medications, Gloria. It does not cover your shopping trips or Tori's constant moving expenses. It does not sustain the home you live in, the car you borrow, or the trips you take. Calvin's projects and grants? Those are funded by my company. Without my signature, they do not exist. Tori scoffed. You make it sound like we depend on you, she said. We are family. Families help each other. You act as if you are doing charity. I nodded slowly. I am not calling it charity, I said. I am calling it what it is, financial responsibility that has never been matched with emotional respect. Gloria waved her hand dismissively. Money again, she said. Always money. Our family has values, affection, loyalty, forgiveness. You cannot put that in a spreadsheet. You cannot buy it. There was a bitter edge in her voice, the resentment of someone who enjoyed the benefits of wealth while pretending to despise the work that created it. I felt something shift inside me. It was not anger that had burned itself out in the alley. This was resolution. Values are easy to praise, I said, when someone else pays the bill. I looked around the table at the people who had pulled from me without once asking if there was anything left. Tonight is the last time you will speak about my work as if it is some cold, mechanical force. That work kept all of you comfortable. Serena stepped forward, voice trembling. Please, she said. We love each other. Let him go. You do not need this fight. You do not need him, but I do. He is everything to me. Her eyes shone with a devotion that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. Here, it only revealed how thoroughly Calvin had rewritten the story. I looked at all of them. The son who betrayed me, the mother who justified him, the sister who shielded her own comfort, the young woman who mistook being rescued for being loved. You are right, I said quietly. I do not need him. I picked up my bag, the gift still inside. Remember this moment. Remember what you chose. Then I walked out. No one followed. They did not need to. They were already counting on something else. They were counting on my patience, on the version of me who would eventually calm down, accept partial blame, and quietly keep everything running. That version of me no longer existed. I stepped into the cool night air, the sounds of the pub fading behind me, and felt the old structure of my life begin to loosen its grip. I did not drive home right away. Instead, I pulled over in a nearby lot overlooking Lake Michigan and sat in silence, letting the noise inside my head settle. The city lights shivered on the water's surface. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. When the first wave of shock passed, I reached for my phone and began to do what I did best, create order. The first call I made was to my assistant, Felicia. Her voice, as always, was steady and professional. Felicia, I said, I need you to freeze every secondary card connected to my personal accounts. That includes Calvin's, Gloria's, and Tori's. Effective immediately. She hesitated for half a heartbeat. Is everything all right? She asked gently. Everything is finally accurate, I replied. This is not punishment. It is separation. The second call was to property management. The house in Lincoln Park had been mine before marriage. My name alone sat on the deed. I will be away for a while, I told the manager. Pause non-essential services. Change nothing permanent. Just treat it as temporarily vacant unless you hear differently from me directly. I did not offer explanations. I had learned the difference between explaining and just informing. The third call mattered most. I contacted the finance department at my company, speaking directly to the chief financial officer. Effective tomorrow, I said, withdraw corporate funding from Calvin Rowe's research project at the university. The contract includes an ethics clause. Consider it activated. Prepare a formal notice for the university indicating termination of support and the reason. There was a brief silence. Understood, the officer said. We will handle it. I did not touch anyone's healthcare coverage. I did not cancel prescriptions outright. I removed myself as guarantor and requested that all future billing be directed to Calvin as the primary responsible party. I transferred relevant medical records and signed the necessary releases. I left choices intact. That mattered to me. Revenge is loud. Boundaries are quiet. When Felicia hesitated again, I added something I had never said aloud. I am not abandoning anyone, I told her. I am resigning from a role I was never meant to play. There was a soft exhale on the other end of the line. Understood, she said. I will send confirmations in the morning. We ended the call, and the final thread of my old life loosened. That night I did not cry. I drove to a small condo overlooking the lake that I had purchased years earlier as an investment and then kept for occasional weekends alone. I unlocked the door, turned on a single lamp, and set my bag on the kitchen counter. The silence felt different here. It was not heavy. It was honest. I showered, washed away the smell of the pub and the city, and pulled on a cotton sleep set I kept in the closet for nights when I escaped here to think. As I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a flood of notifications, declined charges, missed calls, messages piling up. I turned it face down. For the first time in 10 years, I was not at the center of anyone's emergency. The quiet felt like a new language. The next morning I woke early, dressed simply in jeans and a soft sweater, and drove to my children's school earlier than usual. Micah was 10 and Alana was 8. They spotted me from across the parking lot and ran toward me, backpacks bouncing, faces open and unguarded. Their trust nearly broke me more than anything that had happened the night before. "You are early," Micah said, sliding his hand into mine. "Are we in trouble?" He tried to sound light, but his eyes searched my face for clues. "No," I said, forcing a small smile. "You are not in trouble. I just wanted extra time with you today." Alana clung to my other hand, swinging it gently. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "Even though it is early?" "Yes," I said. "Today we can do things out of order." We drove to a small shop near the lake that had just opened for the day and sat by the window while they ate cones for breakfast, their laughter echoing softly in the empty space. I watched them, trying to memorize the way their mouths curved, the way Micah nudged his sister's elbow, the way Alana hummed when she was happy. I wanted to remember how they looked before everything in their world shifted. "Mom," Micah said carefully, setting his cone down. "Are you and Dad fighting again?" His voice was quiet but direct. He had always been like that, able to walk straight toward the truth without circling it. I took a slow breath. "Sometimes," I said, "grown-ups realize they cannot fix something together anymore. That does not change how much we love you." Alana's eyes filled immediately. "I do not want you to split up," she whispered. "Grandma says families must stay together no matter what." Micah did not look away from me. "Dad has someone else," he said. My fingers tightened around my cup. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I saw messages on his phone," Micah said. "He saved her as Serena's student. He smiles when he texts her. He never smiles like that at home." Alana sniffed. "Grandma says I am useless like you," she added in a small voice. "She says I am too sensitive. Aunt Tori takes my things and yells when I cry. She says I have to toughen up." The words hit harder than any insult Calvin had ever thrown at me. I had protected my children financially. I had failed to protect them emotionally from people I had invited into their daily lives. I slid out of my seat and knelt down between them. "I am so sorry," I said, my voice thick. "You should never have heard those words. You are not useless, Alana. You are thoughtful and kind. And you, Micah, should not be the one carrying secrets about adults. That is not your job." Micah's jaw tightened, but his eyes shone. "If Mom and Dad live apart," I asked gently, "who would you want to live with most of the time?" They did not hesitate. "You," they said in unison. Children feel truth the way adults feel weather. They know when a home has become unsafe long before anyone names it. Their answer did not flatter me. It convicted me. I had waited too long. I hugged them both tightly. "From now on," I said, "there will be no more yelling in your home, no more fear, no more pretending everything is fine when it is not. I cannot promise life will be easy, but I can promise you that I will not let anyone make you feel small in your own house again." They looked at me, measuring my words, and then nodded. They believed me. That became my private contract with myself. I did not return to the Lincoln Park house that night. Instead, I arranged for the children to stay with me at the condo for a few days under the pretense of an impromptu break. By morning, my security lead, Malcolm, called to confirm that everything we had discussed in prior contingency plans was underway. "The locks are changed," he said. "Access codes reset. Fingerprint entries updated to you and the children only. Their personal belongings are being packed carefully. Nothing damaged, nothing hidden. Order matters when emotions do not." I walked through the condo as Malcolm spoke, looking out over the lake as the wind curled small waves toward the shore. "Thank you," I said. "Label everything clearly. Clothes, documents, electronics. I want no accusations later about missing items. We are not fighting over objects. We are just ending a false arrangement." By late afternoon, the first calls started coming. Declined cards. Confusion at the gate. Raised voices on voicemails. I let them ring. Around sunset, Malcolm sent a short message. "They are here." I opened the security feed on my tablet and watched in silence. Gloria sat on one of the neatly stacked boxes on the driveway, stunned, her shoulders slumped. Tori paced back and forth, shouting into her phone, gesturing toward the closed gate as if sheer volume could make it open. A taxi idled nearby. The driver stood by the trunk, arms crossed, demanding payment. A card failed. Then another. Embarrassment has a sound. It is sharp and small and full of disbelief. Calvin arrived a few minutes later with Serena at his side. He went straight to the gate and hit the intercom repeatedly, as if force could change policy. I answered from the condo, my voice transmitted clearly through the speaker. "This is not your home anymore," I said. "Please leave." His reply came hot and fast. "You cannot do this. Open the gate and we will talk." "We will talk tomorrow," I said, through our attorneys. Serena cried quietly beside him. Tori cursed under her breath. Gloria called my name over and over, as if invoking old memories might restore their privileges. I did not answer again. They stayed outside longer than pride allowed, waiting for a softness that no longer existed. Eventually, the taxi pulled away, and the feed showed them standing in the fading light, small against the closed gate. I turned off the screen. When you stop rescuing people, they call it cruelty. I called it closure. That night, I tucked Micah and Alana into the small second bedroom of the condo. Micah checked the door twice before he slept. Alana asked if Grandma would come here. "No," I said. "She will not." They both relaxed a fraction, and that was enough to convince me I was doing the right thing. I did not attend the first divorce meeting. That was deliberate. When emotion walks into a room, reason usually walks out. Instead, I sent my attorney, Mr. Harris, with a folder of documents and clear instructions. The meeting took place in a quiet coffee shop near campus, neutral ground, public enough to keep voices low and tempers measured. Calvin sat at the small table, shoulders tense, a deep line carved between his brows. Serena sat close beside him, her hand on his arm, as if physical contact could steady the outcome. Tori sat further back, tapping her phone, while Gloria watched with a mixture of indignation and dread. Mr. Harris laid a thick folder on the table and slid it forward. "These are the divorce papers," Mr. Harris said. "They outline the petition, custody requests, and an asset summary. My client prefers a clean end with minimal public exposure, but she is prepared for the alternative if necessary." Calvin skimmed the first page too quickly, his eyes jumping over words he did not want to absorb. "You cannot take everything," Calvin said, pushing the papers back. "I worked for this family too. I came up with ideas. I supported her. I helped raise our children." Mr. Harris nodded. "No one is erasing your involvement as a father," he said. "But when it comes to financial contributions, the numbers are clear." He opened a second folder. Inside were 10 years of income and expense records. Calvin's salary versus the amounts that had left my accounts for his research, his mother's care, his sister's housing, his personal spending. Side-by-side columns and charts showed the imbalance. Support given exceeded income earned by more than $1 million. The gap was not subtle. It was a canyon. Silence followed. Serena leaned in, eyes scanning the pages, her expression shifting as the narrative she had believed collided with the documented reality. "Reputation matters," she whispered to Calvin. "Signing quietly is better than letting all of this go public. The university will not ignore this if it becomes a case." That word, reputation, landed heavily. The next pages showed documented misuse of funds. Hotel charges on nights Calvin had claimed to be at conferences alone, travel expenses that matched weekends away with Serena, purchases that did not align with his income. Dates overlapped with time he had claimed family obligations or professional commitments. The paper trail spoke clearly even when he did not. "If this proceeds to court," Mr. Harris said calmly, "these records will become public. The university will be formally notified. They will conduct their own review of his employment and ethics. My client is not seeking to destroy his career. She is simply unwilling to finance a life built on deception any longer." Calvin's jaw clenched. Pride wrestled with reality across his face. "What does she want?" he finally asked. Mr. Harris folded his hands. "She wants full physical custody of Micah and Alana," he said. "No alimony. No pursuit of reimbursement for past spending. She keeps the assets that are already legally hers. You keep your salary and whatever you can build from it. In short, she wants a clean end." Gloria bristled. "She cannot keep the children from us," she said. "We are their family too." Mr. Harris nodded. "You may petition for visitation as grandparents," he said. "That is between you and the court. My client's only requirement is that any environment they enter be safe and respectful. That includes how people speak about their mother in front of them." Serena squeezed Calvin's hand. "Sign," she murmured. "We can rebuild. You are smart. You will get another grant. Money is not everything." Her voice shook on the last sentence. Calvin stared at the pen on the table, as if it were a weapon pointed at him. Then he picked it up. His signature trembled across the lines. When the papers were gathered, Mr. Harris stood. "One last message from my client," he said. She thanks you for showing her the truth clearly enough that she could finally act. She wishes you well. He left them sitting there with their copy of the ending they had not expected. Freedom looks different when you have to pay for it yourself. 6 months passed. Life did not collapse. It clarified. Without funding, Calvin's project ended quietly. Without the soft protection of my connections, questions about his ethics at the university turned into formal reviews. A temporary suspension became permanent distance. His days filled with explanations instead of lectures. Gloria's health needs did not disappear. For the first time, Calvin had to manage appointments, insurance calls, and payments without me. The work he had dismissed as controlling suddenly became a maze he had to navigate alone. I struggled most. A lifetime of easy access to my accounts had trained her to avoid effort. When the money stopped, there were no shortcuts left. Serena left first. Love built on rescue does not survive responsibility. When bills arrived and Calvin's attention shifted from romantic speeches to late payment notices, inspiration turned into frustration. She blamed him for promises he could no longer afford, and he had no silent partner to absorb the fallout. I heard none of this directly. I did not need to. It was predictable. My life, meanwhile, grew quieter in ways I had forgotten were possible. I returned to therapy with a seriousness I had previously reserved for audits. Session by session, I learned to untangle guilt from loyalty, obligation from love. My therapist, Dr. Williams, listened without judgment as I described years of quiet sacrifice and the strange emptiness that followed letting go. You believed that enduring more proved you loved more, Dr. Williams said one afternoon. But all it proved was that you were willing to disappear for other people's comfort. The words landed heavily, but not cruelly. They felt like a verdict and an invitation at the same time. I began to rebuild my identity not as infrastructure, but as a person. Mornings with Micah and Alana became slower. There were no more slammed doors or hushed arguments behind bathroom walls. No more children flinching when a phone rang late at night. We cooked simple breakfasts together. We argued over music in the car. We laughed more. The lakefront condo, once a quiet escape, became a home. I returned to work with focus instead of urgency. For the first time, success felt like a choice rather than an obligation. I evaluated contracts with a sharper eye toward how they affected my time, not just my balance sheets. I promoted managers who understood boundaries, both theirs and mine. I stopped apologizing for being decisive. People occasionally asked if I regretted how firmly I had acted. You were so final, one colleague said over lunch. No second chances? No slow separation. I answered honestly. Because love that requires you to erase yourself is not love, I said. It is unpaid labor. Because boundaries are not punishment. They are clarity. Because when someone calls you cold for protecting yourself, what they really mean is that you stopped being useful to them. I did not destroy a family. I stopped funding a lie. Today, I live without the constant fear of being misunderstood on purpose by people who do not want to face themselves. My children laugh easily. They sleep through the night. I breathe without calculating everyone else's needs before my own. That is not revenge. It is the life that remains when you stop carrying people who chose to climb instead of walk beside you. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.